I hope he's about to discuss something that I've been utilizing. I think I discussed this before, but I hope he mentions it because I actually never really heard anyone discuss about this, like outlining chapters while writing. I hope he's meant like outlining and writing chapters at the same time. I hope he's mentioning that, but let's see what he has to say.
The chapter outline is usually one paragraph. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen in this chapter, or a couple of sentences, three sentences maybe. You do that to pacing is so crucial. You've got you. I'm always concerned with pacing, and so to do that, you've got to know what's in the chapters and are they too long, too short, whatever. That's a constant challenge every day. Is how long do you keep a chapter? When do you break it up? When do you give the reader a break? When do you switch scenes completely or go to a different subplot? That's why the outlining is so important, because you got to work that stuff out ahead of time before you start the book. Because if you always know where you're going, it's hard to get lost. And writers are notorious for having a brilliant idea, jumping into the novel, writing like crazy for a year, and then realize they don't know where to go next, or what the end is, and they've written themselves into a corner. That is fairly common in this business, and I'm not going to do that. I want to know what the ending is, and so I keep the chapter summaries fairly succinct, and I'm always tinkering with them. Once I have the outline finished, it doesn't stay like that. I'll start the book. If the outline works, I'll start the book, but I'm always tinkering with the outline too. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the time it's finished, I can't even read the thing. It's so messy. But that's how I handle that.
Okay. He somewhat mentioned what I was thinking about. Let me first give my thoughts on what he mentioned. So the first thing is, I think this is more of a video on the importance of outlining for your novel. And one thing that stuck out to me was the fact that he mentioned, oh, knowing where you're going and like being lost in sea. I guess this happens a lot to like pantsers, the ones who write stories without really much of a planning. They just like start writing. I'm assuming that happens a good amount. Like it's like pros and cons to everything, of course. Like yeah, like with a pantser you could like get a lot done. Like they take a lot of action so they could get like a lot of the draft done early on, while people who plan out their drafts might spend way too long with the drafting process, and that takes way longer and they just need to like start their outline eventually. That is very important. Like that's really one of the main tools of an outline, is so that you have an idea of where you're going, what the direction of your story is going to take. Having a grasp of the ending, that's another thing I want to point out. Yeah, I realize that it's so hard to kind of navigate your story, like knowing where. Honestly, it gets hard to navigate like in the middle of the story. It gets really difficult to navigate like the middle portion of the story when you don't really have a clue of the ending and how the story is gonna end. Cause it's like your middle could like really extend like a lot depending on how much you grasp the ending of the story. So I'll say this, like the middle portion honestly gets longer the less uncertain you are with the end. Just because what tends to happen, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe, or maybe it's just like the people I spoke to. What happens is, because we have no idea what the ending is, we tend to like expand the story a lot more with like extra fluff or extra stuff that didn't really need to be there, and it's like less focused, right? Like, with the story, because we don't really have a direction, it becomes less focused, so we just enter into like a bunch of different pathways that didn't really need to be explored, just because we didn't really have much of a focus. Because I think knowing the ending provides focus. Like it kind of shuts down like other doors that probably could have been left off from the story, maybe could be explored in like a book too, but because we don't have that ending, we just exploring like a bunch of doors and opening a bunch of possibilities that honestly didn't need to be explored in the first place, or could have been left for another time, like I said, book two or anything like that. But yeah, so I kind of like how he mentioned those parts. Like it really emphasized the importance of outlining in that sense. But the main thing I wanted to discuss is like he has in the title, like how he outlines his chapters while writing. I thought he was going to be discussing about writing your first draft while outlining at the same time, because that's what I do at times. So this is what I mean, right? Like, let's say I think he mentioned this before, like he outlines to the point where he feels like he's sort of ready to write his first draft. Like he just gives himself an idea of like a direction of where to go. But he also mentioned the fact that in the chapters, if he needs more notes, let's say, or more details, then he goes back into the outline and the outline expands. That's kind of what I do. Let's say this I have a great direction of exactly all the events and what needs to happen from chapter one to chapter five. Let's say that, okay? Then if I'm like a little bit more vague about what's happening after chapter five, like the beginning of chapter six, six, seven, and eight, then what I would do is I'll go back to the outline and I'll outline, okay, like what do I really want chapter six, seven, and eight to focus on, and what should be the main events that be happening, and what do I want the characters to be doing. So then I'll go back to my outline, do that, jot some ideas down, things like that. And then I'll go back to the first draft and draft out chapter six, seven, and eight once I have a better idea of how those chapters is gonna go. And that's kind of my process whenever I'm like stuck in certain chapters in my novel, then that's what I tend to do, especially in the middle, because the middle I just get stuck a lot. So I think that's really because you're trying to put enough details to where you could reach the ending of the story, but you don't want to put like you're trying to like what I'm trying to say, you're trying to find the balance of putting enough details so that it makes sense to approach the ending, but you also don't want to put too much details where you have fluff, like too much fluff where people lose focus of the direction of the story, like yourself and the reader. And you don't want to put too little small details to where you feel like you're just like rushing the ending and people didn't feel enough suspense, enough growth, or didn't spend enough time with the characters before they could really see their vision or their goals being fulfilled or whatever is being fulfilled in the ending. So it's really what makes the middle part so crucial and so like difficult to navigate at times. So I think really this method really helps, especially with like the middle part of your story, like when you're drafting out your story, is like, okay, like, chapter 12 is like, oh, man, I need to go back to my outline and kind of get more detail on what these next few chapters is going to be. And then also when you have a grasp of the ending, you when you writing out these chapters is like, okay, I already have someone idea of the end in mind. So it's like, okay, when I'm going back into my outline and getting more detailed with it, it's like, okay, does this align with the ending? Is this like following that path? Like, is it pushing the path forward so that I could reach the ending, you know? Even you don't have to have like a completely detailed image in your mind of what the ending is going to be. Like, as long as you have somewhat of a vague idea of what the ending is going to be, then that's probably good enough. Until, of course, you reach closer to the ending of your first draft, of course, then you might need to start writing a more detailed idea of what that's going to be. Um, One thing that could help is characters, how you view your characters, what type of growth you want them to go through, what type of like questions you believe like you want your readers to have, and then write down the type of answers you could possibly come up with. Yeah, because really the ending is really about answering questions that you're implanting into your reader's mind on purpose. So yeah, just think about those the main questions that you believe readers is gonna have and try to answer them, and that's probably what's gonna be happening in the end. Another thing, of course, I think I mentioned this. Your characters, the type of growth, what type of character traits you want them to develop, throughout the story, especially if it's a like a growth focused story where they're developing a lot between the beginning and the end. You know, write down traits that they have in the beginning, and then write down traits that you want them to develop by the end. And then what I like to do is when I'm thinking about the middle portion of my story is like, okay, what type of actions one thing will help is like kind of utilizing people you know in real life or maybe people you know online whatever, but what actions you believe it takes or you've seen others in your family or whatever friends, what actions do they normally take to be the type of person that has the trait that you want your character to have. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So to giving you a quick example, let's say you want them to be a better leader. What type of leadership trait does like your mother show in terms of, I guess, taking care of you as a human being? That what actions does she take that makes you perceive her as a leader? To where you could like use those actions to implement into your character so that it makes sense to be seen as a leader by the end of the story. Does that make sense? Like overall, what I'm trying to say is take the actions, like whoever person you see as like a leader, if let's say that's the trait, take the actions that as the people you see as leaders, take their actions and put that in your characters so that you could see them as a leader by the end of the story. I think that's the best way I can explain it. But yeah, there's probably other things that makes novels very not novels. There's probably other things that makes outlines very important that really helps with guiding your first draft. And you know how I say first draft, right? Like this is really just to help you guide your first draft for the most part. Don't treat your first draft as the final draft. I made a video just for that. Don't treat it like like the final draft. Don't worry about your first draft being bad. Not at all. At all. So yeah, I hope this video helps and kind of help me dive more deeply into my thoughts about the relationship between outlines and first draft and how, you know, they help each other as like a bonding relationship and how it helps with your overall story in general. So yeah, I hope this video helps. Thank you for watching. If you need anything with your outline, let's say you're stuck with the outline, you need ideas, suggestions, anything to do with that, you could click the link down below. There's also a video here and there to explain my consultation calls where I help, you know, writers just like you that in order to complete their first draft, they need any assistance when it comes to their outline, ideas with their characters, plot ideas, world building, anything but to do with that. In order to feel more confident with your first draft, you could set up a call with me and then we'll discuss about your story in details. Give me a couple days because I'm gonna be reading your outline. Like, make sure to send me your outline so I could read it, have some questions prepared, some suggestions prepared, things like that. So yeah, I hope this helps. I hope you enjoy. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I don't know when I'm gonna upload this, but when I'm recording is about to be Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's watching. So yeah, watch out upload this in like Christmas. I don't know when I'm uploading this, but yeah. Thank you. Have a great day.